Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, pronouns of your choosing. It is that time of the week once again. Welcome back to the Firefighters podcast. We're going to jump headfirst to another amazing episode. Congratulations on making the decision to be here with us today. It was a good decision. You're not going to regret it. Without further ado, let's see who we got in the hot seat for today. This week on the podcast, I'm speaking with my good friend, Cara Judd. The powerful, the athletic, the gorgeous, the inspiring, the all go no quit, Fire Department, Central New York, USA, also representing St. Florian Fitness. It's a pleasure to have Cara on the podcast today. Cannot wait for us to get amongst it with this one. But before we kick it off, let's hear from those incredible peeps that make up the rest of our podcast family. It's our silent soldiers, our partners of the podcast. First up, we have PBI Performance Products. PBI products are protection without compromise. Now, PBI fabrics have been renowned for their unique combination of flame resistance, durability, and comfort. I have worn PBI products since starting my career 13 years now, and they are the very first choice in protection for pretty much every extreme condition, from NASA astronauts to emergency responders, the military, Formula One. So it goes without saying, we are a massive fan of PBI, and it's great to have them as a fan and a sponsor of the podcast. If you want to hear more about it, go over to pbiproducts.com or just check in the notes below. You will find a link to PBI. A big thanks once again to our long-term sponsor, William Wood Watches, who bring us, of course, our Chivalrous Collection, Bronze Edition, Valiant Collection, and coming to 2021 from the 1st of March is their new Triumph Collection. William Wood Watches is a UK-based watch manufacturer where upcycling is taken to a whole new level. William Wood are all about history on your wrist and feeling the beat of the fire service with you every step of the way. William Wood Watches has the vision to be the leading sustainable watch brand that upcycles rescue service materials for a new life, once forgotten, now reborn. Johnny always says the best part of the journey for him was seeing the watches on the wrists of people who appreciate the story, the history, the values. If you want to become part of the William Wood Watches family, head over to williamwoodwatches.com, where Johnny and the team have some beautiful, beautiful pieces to share with us. So get over, have a look, get yourself registered, and check out some of the incredible stuff at williamwoodwatches.com. Now, are you the sort of person that wants to be in there, in the know, first thing? Then if you want to hear about enhanced limited time offers and exclusive giveaways for emergency services workers, NHS, social care, armed forces members, then be sure to like and follow the Blue Light Card on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, with weekly announcements and competitions with brands such as Prezzo, Starbucks, P&O Cruises, that's right, P&O Cruises. Make sure you are in with a chance of winning today. Head over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and search for Blue Light Card. Give them a follow, give them a like. You should be there anyway. Every day you fail to do this, you are missing out on some of the great savings from Blue Light Card, specifically put together as that massive thank you to all of our emergency services operators. Well, there you have it, boys and girls. They are the names in the frames. They're the incredible partners joining us along for the ride. So without further ado, if you're sitting comfortably, if you can barely contain your excitement any longer, then buckle up for safety. And I will see you on the other side. Cara, good morning.
Morning.
Hello, how are you?
Wow, how are you? Sound okay?
You sound perfect.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I love your t-shirt.
Thank you. It's snowing here, which is terrible.
Snowing?
Yeah, it's snowing like big, huge snowflakes, which is devastating, but
why?
That's May in Central New York. You never know.
I think it looks beautiful in the snow.
That is how it is up here. It's the coffee. It's 100% the coffee. Yeah, we have very strange weather here. And we're right in the central part of New York State. If you look at New York State on a map and you put your finger like right in the middle of the state, that's where I live. And we have beautiful weather. And in the summer, it's gorgeous. And we have lakes and mountains and everything here. But we can get snow as late as May. So here we are.
Whoa. I'll just say we had a little bit of snow the other day, but it was so random. We had like stunning sunshine, and then we had hail, and then we had snow, and then we had beautiful sunshine again. I just think this is Mother Nature trying to send us a little bit of a message, but I don't know.
Yeah, I just roll with it. Layers.
So did you get the notes and things that I sent over to you? I know you had a little bit of a look the other day. There's absolutely no way to ever do this right. Have you ever done a podcast before?
Yes, I actually co-host a podcast called The Professional Volunteer.
Awesome.
I have been on a couple other ones too, so I'm no like Zoom expert, but I do my best.
Good. You'll be absolute consummate professional then. Probably better than me. So I'll apologize in advance if I completely mess it all up.
We'll get through it together.
Beautiful. I love it. Cara, welcome to the Firefighter podcast. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, over in the UK, we've got some truly inspiring ladies. As I've been doing the podcast, we've been looking around and really finding some incredible beasts, just getting after it and really leading by example. But when I got familiar with your story, there was so many factors that I found inspiring, both from sort of the trailblazing aspect of going first with the promotions and stuff within your department, but also just as a woman in the fire service. We had the first ever female firefighter in the UK, Josephine Reynolds. She wrote a book called Firewoman. She was on recently. And I feel like you're the stateside version of her. You've really trailblazed in an area that is really still, I think, a predominantly male environment. So when did you first want to join the fire service?
Well, I grew up in the firehouse. Excuse me. I was a firehouse brat. My father was a lieutenant on the department where I'm at now. So lots of riding around on fire trucks and, kind of running around in the firehouse, and kind of that was our family's lifestyle. So it was a big part of my life from the time that I was a child. And I have always been very service oriented and really wanted to give back in my community, especially.
Now, I get really romantic when I hear about some of the stateside sort of communities and morale and sort of stuff that you see in firehouses. Is it really the same as I think it to be? I've not had the pleasure of visiting a fire service or a fire department over there, but when you see the cookouts and when you see the family barbecues that they have on the stations, is it still like that now? And is that what your childhood is in my imagination?
That really was my experience with my fire department, and it is currently how my experience is with my fire department.
Wow.
As a child, we did, as a family, we would go to the, firehouse clam bakes and barbecues. When we had any special events like parades or anything like that, all of the firehouse kids were like so excited because we got to ride in the trucks in the parade. And, all of our friends would be lining the streets to watch the parade. And we'll be like, hey, we were in the truck, So, all the, my mom was a member of the auxiliary, which is a support system for the fire department. So the women's auxiliary at the time, when my mom was in, they would, if they had a big structure fire or out to a late call, they would gather and make food. And then some of the other, the kids would be there and the families would be there when the firefighters would come back. We would all have meals. And so
wow.
There was definitely a lot of that in my experience growing up. It was part of our social structure, certainly. And now in my department, it is definitely a brotherhood. I am very tight with the guys there. They're my brothers. Anybody needs anything, all we have to do is call each other and we're right there. It's unspoken, it's part of it. And it's been very enriching for my life. I always say the fire service has given more to me than I've ever given to it.
I love that. Absolutely love that. And I totally agree. It echoes my own thoughts and feelings. When you say about your dad being in, your mum being part of this female, was it a female auxiliary? And I don't want today's episode to be all about the boy-girl thing, but was it for all spouses of firefighters, or was your dad's crew and brotherhood, was it all guys that were on the crew back then?
Back then in the fire department as firefighters, I think there was only, in my childhood, I can only really remember one female firefighter that was on the department, Betsy Kennedy. And she was inspiring to me as a child, being that she was a female firefighter there. But the auxiliary is a membership. It's and it was, at the time I was growing up, it was all women and predominantly wives or mothers of the firefighters. Mm. And their role was a very important one. At the time, like I say, if the guys were out on a call, they would get coffee and food and sandwiches and bring them to the scene, especially if they were fighting a large fire and were going to be out on the scene for quite some time. They would bring food and refreshments there. They would have coffee and things ready at the station when the team came back. They were also responsible for some fundraising and some volunteer civic organizational kind of things as well in the auxiliary. Mm-hmm. Now in our auxiliary, we do have men in our auxiliary at our department, and they help out again with the fundraising. They do, if we have a big call, they will bring us Gatorades and coffee and, things like that to the scene. They always bring donuts, and the joke that I have with the auxiliary members is, "Can you bring me a protein bar?" So now they have a running joke. They're like, "Get donuts and then bring Kara a protein bar." So
I love that.
Yeah, so it's a nice little civic organization, and it's very common, especially among the volunteer departments here in the United States, to have an auxiliary.
I'm astonished that they still have that with as busy as life is today, because I've got 3 children. My wife works with horses and children and stuff like that, and she's super supportive. She'll always, we talk to each other during the day and whatever, see how each other's getting on, and if I need to come and help her or she needs to come and help me, whatever, then we'll of course do that. But life just feels so busy for people these days. It's crazy and amazing that you still have that level of support. Do you think the communities surrounding the fire department are as strong as they once were? Because we have less of the breadwinner analogy now, where one person is the main income holder, and there's much more equality, I suppose, in relationships that sometimes comes at the sacrifice of being able to support each other as much. Does that reflect anything that you see at all?
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, that aspect of it is different from when I was a child. People are certainly a lot busier. Work schedules are a lot more complicated. Even the jobs themselves aren't necessarily the 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 anymore.
No.
People are working different shifts. Families are working different shifts, and sometimes they're working weekends as well, very often. So we have seen a decline in some of the memberships, just because people just don't have the time for it like they used to. And there has been a decline in some of the extracurricular, like the attendance of some of the extracurricular activities within the firehouse. We still get amazing. I mean, everybody wants to train, everybody wants to work, everybody wants to do that stuff. But when it comes to like picnics and clam bakes and things like that, it just seems like everybody's social schedules, and like if they have kids, like their kids like sports or activities, or sometimes that really has an impact on some of the extracurricular stuff.
Yeah, I suppose it can be a bit of an awkward one, because a lot of people join the fire department because it's just an overwhelming passion for them. But then we're striking that balance now where we appreciate that to some people, and we all feel differently about it. It is just a job sometimes. But for you, with that heritage and with your folks being in and stuff like that, how long have you been in the fire department now?
I've been an active firefighter for 6 years now within my department. So I'm still a baby.
You're still a baby. 6 years is still good though, but you've already risen, and this was kind of the factor I wanted to get into was, so you're a lieutenant in your department now, and to my understanding, you're the first female lieutenant that's ever been there. Is that right?
That's correct. I'm the first female officer in the history of our department. Our department was founded in 1810.
Wow. So 210 years and there's never been a female lieutenant. Why is that? Because women are strong, they're powerful, they lead the household. How is that so different to lead in on an Instagram ground?
Well, you did point out earlier that it's still very much a male-dominated field, and that's 100% correct. And that's true in the U.S. as well. In the United States, depending on who's running the statistics, it's anywhere between only 7 to 10 or 11% of firefighters are female.
Really?
In the U.S. So it's a very, very small number. In my department, it was not so much that it wasn't like welcomed or anything like that. It was just that there weren't really any women that was their goal. There's been women in the fire department where I work on and off throughout the years. But they don't seem to stay, and I don't really know why that is. I think it's a variety of reasons. Some of them start very young, and then if they get married and have children and things like that, it becomes difficult for them to balance. I think so that was an issue. I don't know why there hasn't been a female officer. I don't know that the ones that have been there, like I spoke about Betsy, who was the female firefighter that I remember. I think she just didn't. That wasn't her interest in firefighting, was to be in the officer line.
Now, when going for promotion and stuff like that, I think for men and women, a big aspect of it is sort of confidence, self-doubt, and kind of like imposter syndrome. Because like you said, you're still a baby. You've only been in sort of 6 years. Was there any aspect of feeling confident enough, knowing if anybody's going to listen to me? Was there any aspects of self-doubt? Because whilst you had role models as firefighters, there was nobody to look up to in respect of a leadership role.
Absolutely. One of the things that I did was speak with my mentor at the department prior to running for fire line officer before I ran for lieutenant. I sought his advice, and I asked him to give me a frank and honest assessment if he thought that I was ready. The leadership in the department did approach me about running and encouraged me to run. So I knew that there was the thought that I was capable and that they would have me move up, but I did want to kind of seek that out myself as well.
Yeah.
And one thing that was extremely important to me, and that is still very important to me, is that it's not that I wasn't being sought out because of kind of the aspect of we don't have a woman and it would be good to have a woman. Like, I didn't want it to be about that. I wanted it to be about my skill.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there any aspect of the feedback that you found it hard to take? Because we call it sort of positive reinforcement or feedback, but sometimes if we don't like it, we can think it's just criticism. How did your feedback go?
Well, I was, his biggest thing to me was that he said, sometimes I think that you know what you need to do and you know what you're doing, but you reserve yourself because you have that hesitancy to put yourself out there. Yeah. And it's always the accurate stuff that's hard to hear.
Yeah. They say that the difference is a very, very small difference between oblivious and obvious. And some people sometimes like, I don't really know why, when they really think about it, when they get that feedback, like say, is obvious, and you know all of the answers. And ultimately, it's just that self-belief. And sometimes it's a lack of experience. Sometimes it's just there's some massive character. I mean, in the fire department in general, it tends to attract big, strong characters who, when they're in the mood and they're on your team and they're feeling good, they're the most powerful thing about what we do. But on the late calls, on the times when they believe they've got the right approach at an incident, that's where the real leadership comes in.
Absolutely. And I didn't want it to be this way, but I had to admit to myself that being the first female was going to add an extra layer of challenge. And so that was something I really had to prepare myself for going into it. I just had to have that mindset, that if I'm really going to speak my truth and how I feel about it, that it doesn't matter as long as I can do the job, then I just have to nut up and do the job.
Nut up. I love that. So we talk about things like command presence, but also I would imagine, I don't want to stereotype it too much, some of the female leaders that I've worked with have often they have a more powerful ability to communicate in terms of sympathy, empathy, and things like that, while sometimes they can be lacking in command presence or decision making. And this is not a generalization. I do feel that there are some massive strengths to having the background that you've had. You've seen your dad demonstrate those leadership abilities, but then you're also able to couple them with that really nice, intelligent, but gregarious way of communicating, similar to how you're demonstrating today on the podcast, I suppose.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between you having a leadership presence and speaking loudly.
Definitely.
You don't necessarily need to have the loudest voice in the room. No. I'm a big proponent of leading by example. And so a huge part of what I try to do is when I'm interacting with patients on a medical call, or even if we're on a fire scene and I'm interacting with the family who are the victims of the house fire, I try to really show how to do that kind of work and show that part of the job is just as important as the physical work that we're doing, dragging hose line, opening up ceilings, all of that stuff that we're doing. We need to work hard and we need to be diligent in our practice so that we have skills when they're needed. But we also need to recognize the human side of it. And I do think that as a female, I come into it with a different perspective, and also from my past jobs that I've had also gave me that experience level and that skill level in interacting with the community and with families that are in a trauma situation.
Yeah. I love what you said about, people arbitrarily just raising their voice and believing that that's the strongest way to command importance and stuff like that. I had a wonderful mentor once that spoke to me and said how your And I think probably now thinking back, probably a lot of this has played into the podcast in that your voice is like an instrument. He said you've got to think about it in terms of speed, tempo, and not just volume. He said some people speak louder and just in a desire to be heard. But he said if you can articulate yourself really well, and if you don't raise your voice, what actually happens, and I saw this after he told me that, I observed him several times in different environments, and he would always not be the loudest person in the room. In fact, he'd be one of the quieter members, even at like a large table having a discussion. Because when he began to speak, what would actually happen is people would lean in and the room would slowly quiet. And you could get that response through two methods. Some people would just try and speak louder than everybody else and then hope that everyone else would quiet down. But then it becomes a battle and ego and pride and everything starts to get involved. But like you've said there, if you just deliver value in a calm, collected, consistent, and articulate manner, you haven't got to do it loudly. People tend to lean in and they go, well, Kara's saying something, or Steve was the gentleman's name at the time. He's saying something, and people lean in. Do you see that at all? Is that making any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And in my past role, I formerly worked in pediatrics, and I actually learned that there.
Oh,
because
really?
yes, children in hospital settings, and my predominant experience in pediatrics is in pediatric trauma.
Wow.
So kids are very scared when they come into emergency and are very frightened, and sometimes they're crying really loudly. So a lot of times the staff's response is to try to yell over the crying, and all that does is make the kid more scared. So in my work there, I always learned that you should talk to them with one voice, so only one person should be talking, and you should talk in a calm, measured, even tone, regardless of what is happening around you.
Yeah.
And that way, what would happen was the children would automatically focus on you because you were calming them, and then they would quiet down so they could hear what you were saying.
I love
and
that.
Unsurprisingly, these tactics with children work very well with men. So it was very easy transition for me to start over.
I love that. And I think, what that speaks a lot to me is something called the mirror neuron. And it exists in all of us. And you know how people say a smile is contagious, or they say how misery loves company and things like that. And this comes a lot if you look into the neurological side of it. We have something called a mirror neuron. And because we're chemical beings, and because we have all that oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, and all that sort of stuff, we want to connect with each other. We're group animals. Do you know what I mean? We want to feel like we belong with somebody. We want to feel that connection. So subconsciously, if you begin to mirror somebody else, you automatically feel closer to them. And now you can manipulate this. Now we see it at very extreme ends of the spectrum. Like if you frown and scowl at somebody, they'll frown and scowl back at you. But also if you are, for example, being intimate with a partner, your breathing will start to mirror each other. You will become in sync. And it's the same in lots of other ways. It's the old analogy also, treat people how you want to be treated. And I feel like you've articulated it beautifully there, that if you come in, like I've got Be the Difference tattooed on one of my hands just here. And I always say to somebody, look, if you want somebody to be a better listener, then you be a better listener. And we all know that, if you want somebody to be more sympathetic, then you be more sympathetic. And I feel like that's what you're saying there. Is that accurate, do you think? Yeah,
it's a great analogy. It definitely works. And if you are interacting with your staff that way, I think that is more welcoming to them when you do have any issues or concerns that need to be addressed. If that's your standard of how you're interacting with people, it makes you more approachable. And then if you do have to address any issues, or if there is conflict, then that's your baseline. Yeah. So you can always come back to your baseline. And I think it sets a really good precedent in terms of communication style.
I wanted to just jump back for a second and sort of double click on your pediatric trauma experience. I mean, that title in itself sounds pretty horrific, to be honest with you. I mean, firefighters in general, I know when I speak to new recruits and we say, how are you going to, I always think it's a stupid question, but they say, how are you going to deal with death and trauma? Now, to be honest, anything they say is going to be a best guess, because until you're in the moment, you never really know. But I think a fairly universal fear is that you will arrive at an incident where either a vulnerable person or a child is involved in a very traumatic event. But you kind of started there before you even joined the fire department. So without getting too personal, of course, and casualties and names and stuff like that, what were some of the sort of big lessons learned, or what were some of the more challenging incidents that you had to deal with during your time as a pediatric care?
Well, I was a certified child life specialist, and that's I think you have something similar in the UK. But basically, my job was to help in medical procedures on children and be a support person to the kids and families going through medical intervention, so that their development wasn't negatively impacted once they were discharged and healing.
Yes.
The predominant area of my work was in peds trauma. And then I also spent a lot of time working in peds palliative care hospice. In that time of my career, I was doing home care. So when kids were put on hospice or end-of-life care, I would go into the homes and I would do things with the kids, like talk to them about, depending on their age, the older kids and teens, for example, if they had like cystic fibrosis or muscular dystrophy or something where we knew that they were going to have a shortened lifespan, when they became teenagers and we knew they were nearing end of life, some of the things that I would talk about with them and work with them was funeral planning and legacy building and how they wanted to be remembered and what they wanted their siblings to know about them and what they wanted their parents to remember about them. And then we would do memory making and all kinds of activities like that. And then very often I was called to be present during the time of death. And I would sit with the families and work with them during the time that they would let their child go. And in that experience, people ask me this a lot, like, how can you do that? Or how did you do that? Or, how did you work through it? For me, it was very much an honor to be a part of that experience that is so intimate and personal for families. I likened it to being present for a birth. It's something that's, it's the start of life versus the end of life. We all have a beginning of our life and we're all going to have an end of our life. There's a lot of fear and insecurity and sadness, certainly with a death. But it is a natural part of life, and it doesn't have to be a terrifying and fearful experience, especially for children and families. We can do something to make it better for them. And that was just always my focus and my goal. I can't take the pain away. I can't make this, a better outcome, but I can make this moment in time better for you. And if I have the strength and mental capacity and ability to do that, I want to do it. And that's the very reason why I want to be in the fire service too. This is a terrible situation you're in. You're having a medical emergency. You're having a fire. This is something you never wanted to happen, but I'm here. I know some things that can help make this as better as possible in this situation. So I want to be able to do that.
I love that. And I totally agree with you. When we talk about having a good job, yesterday was a great job, and it might have been a fatality. And people go, what do you mean, Pete? How was that a great job? And I'm like, look, control the controllables. Right. You can't control how people behave on the road. You can't control every aspect of their home life and their upbringing, the whole nature versus nurture, their interpretation of safety in the home and things like that. You can't control that. Ultimately, human error is always going to enter the equation at some point in various different levels. So it's going to happen. We can't control that. But what we can do is know that someone is going to have to be there. Someone is going to get the call. That is always going to exist in some capacity or another. The role of a firefighter and the role of all emergency services operators is changing almost on a daily basis. But what always going to be required, and I agree with you, I find it an absolute privilege and an honor to be the fact that someone is having the worst day of their life and they've called you to make it better. They've called Cara to come and help with a solution, help mediate, help mitigate the damage that's being caused in this. And I love what you said about some of the things you work with the children. I remember there's a place called Rainbows, which is a charity that exists in the UK, and they do a lot of end-of-life care for children. And I remember visiting one of their facilities, and it was really real, I didn't even know how to interpret it, because one of the rooms that they had, and it sounds as though you were doing this similar work with the children, they were given the opportunity to design or orchestrate or put together the music that would be played at their funeral. And I just that thought process was very, very strange. And I went back a couple of years because the company I was involved with at the time, we would do a Christmas party for them and give them a chance for a bit of levity and stuff like this. And even after the children had passed, the parents sometimes would continue to attend the facility, or the siblings. And I remember going back on a second year and seeing somebody and going, hey, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. How's Johnny? Where is he? I'm looking forward to seeing him. And they said, oh, he left us in July. And you just think like, oh, Jesus. I just feel like you put your foot in it. But it was just surreal, very surreal. There's just something eternally that doesn't match about a parent burying their child. But these, control the controllables. This is not within our aspect of control.
Absolutely. And I'm a part of the critical incident stress debriefing team here. So when we have like a bad call, or oftentimes, as you say, like if children are involved, that's really hard on the firefighters. So we'll go in and within 72 hours, do a debriefing and talk about it and things like that. And one of the things that I always share with the guys, especially, is, it seems against nature to us when children die. It doesn't seem right. Like, we think of death as being an old age problem, but death is an everyone problem. So people ask me that if children really understand about death or know that they're dying and things like that. And I had a 12-year-old that had relapsed in cancer, and they asked us to come talk to the family. And the mother met me at the door and said, she's dying, but don't tell her. And I listened to her and I said, okay. So I went and talked to the little girl, and I said, hey, how's today going for you? And, where her headspace was. And she said, well, not well, actually dying. I'll tell my mom. So it was actually very that.
Hello. You sound fantastic.
Hi. Oh, good.
I'm so sorry about this. The Wi-Fi wizards are against us.
No worries at all. Not a problem.
That's the last bit I got from you, was speaking about the aspects of the children. I wanted to ask you next about preparing for promotion. So you'd kind of gotten to that point where you'd had your feedback, you'd had a bit of self-reflection, you thought about what you needed to work on. And how did you then go about preparing for the promotion? What was the process, and how do you go about it in the US?
For my department, it is a by vote position. You have to be nominated, and then you have to have majority vote in order to get into the position. I should clarify that it's different for other departments. This is just what my experience was. But to prepare for it, I really tried to take as many classes and trainings as I could. I showed up all the time, often, really tried very diligently not to ever miss a training, not to ever miss classes, things like that. Really became dedicated to building my skills in as many different ways that I could. I tried to, go on a variety of, whatever calls that I was on. I tried to really gain the experience and knowledge and watch the officers and how they handled different calls. So that I could then learn from that, rather than just, obviously you get assigned your task and you're doing your task. But I also tried very carefully to watch the officers and how they handled the calls, how they gave out assignments, how they handled things that inevitably came up, like if there was an equipment failure, or if we were missing something that we should have had, or if there was any miscommunications. I really tried to start paying attention to those details as well. So that was really something that I was focused on.
I love what you said about having a majority vote. That majority vote aspect surprises me, but I love it. And to my knowledge, we've never had that in the UK. Now I'm trying to encourage. Have you ever heard of 360 feedback?
Yeah.
Yeah, so 360 feedback, I'm a massive advocate for it. I've done it in private businesses many, many times. I think it's a really useful. So for anybody not familiar with it, it's a very simplistic feedback tool, but it's designed to get, as the name would suggest, more of a 360 view. So from people the individual works with, from subordinates or recruits, but also from higher management, somebody maybe you've worked with on a project, or even from a customer. So for us, it might be going on an instant ground. Anybody you've worked with, whether it's community safety, risk, something like that. And it gives you a much better understanding of the person's impact on other people, rather than your intention. You can have great intentions on the way that you want to lead people or interact with people, but what impact are you actually having? And we don't currently adopt it. I know in my service in the UK, and I think it's quite rare. And you find people will have to pass an exam they'll have an interview through which we can be as creative as we like with the evidence that things that we've done and projects that we've been part of. But I love what you say, that because ultimately you're going to be leading people, and if the people don't want to follow you, then you're going to be very ineffective. That's when you become a manager versus a leader.
Absolutely. That's 100% correct. So here in the United States, actually the majority of firefighters are volunteer, and there's the career department do have a promotional exam that you have to take. But as you pointed out, what that does leave out is the team's views and thoughts.
Yeah.
If someone,
it means you can assimilate knowledge. So if you can absorb a lot of knowledge and repeat it, wonderful. Is anybody listening though?
Correct. And on our testing, for example, here for those departments, it's a civil service promotional exam, and it's multiple choice. So I always found that interesting. Like you just happened to pick the right one, and you picked more right answers than the person next to you.
Yes,
but that shouldn't be.
And therefore, I'm going to put you in a position to ultimately be in charge of, community safety and stuff like that, and the impact that the fire department's having on the community, but also people's engagement, people's enjoyment. One of the saddest things I see is when you visit a firehouse or a fire department, and there are people there that don't enjoy the job. And they don't enjoy being there. Yeah. And I think that's nothing to do with the job. It's not, we've all got the same equipment pretty much. It's similar pay, similar policies. It's the people that make the difference. That's what is wrong in the places where I see people unfulfilled in the job.
I think that's 100% accurate. So the voting process, although it does come with its own challenges, certainly, because you want to make sure that it's not just based on who everybody likes. You hope that there's integrity in the vote, but the vote does really speak volumes. If you have, the majority vote saying, I don't want this person to lead me into a fire. Yeah. That really says something.
Even if you just had it as a factor, because what my ideology is that it should be maybe 50%, of this 360 feedback or a vote, 50% of it should be a vote. Like if you were given a mark, say like 4 people were going for a promotion, I would love to see that 50% of that was done through 360 feedback, and then maybe 25 or 30% was done through an interview, and then 25 to 30% again was done through an exam. So you've got to demonstrate the knowledge. Right. You've got to demonstrate your ability to communicate it, because you're like, have you absorbed the knowledge? Great. What have you done with it? So that's your interview. So what have you been part of? Cara, what have you done that's made a difference in the department? How have you moved it forward? And then thirdly, which should be the largest part, do people want to follow you? So you've demonstrated you've got the intelligence, you've demonstrated you've got the ability to act on your decisions, to be creative, to be, intuitive, whatever it may be. But does anybody want to follow you? Because you can be as articulate as you like, but a leader without somebody following them is just somebody out on a walk. Basically, they're not. Nobody wants to follow you. Right.
There's the factor of, especially I think even more so in the fire service, the things that we are asking people to do are things that other people are saying we should be running in the other direction.
Exactly.
We're saying we're going to go into this burning building. Follow me, And so if you're really going to say that, and then you have your team that from the get-go, before you even start, before the color of your helmet even changes, is saying, I don't want to follow you. That's putting everybody at risk.
I think, honestly, though, and the problem is I agree with you, but the bigger problem is I belong to services and a different culture in the UK where, and I would not be so egotistical to say that I can speak on behalf of the entire UK fire service, but I don't see that in any of the fire services that I'm aware of, because they're so worried over here. And I don't want to get into that sort of conversation, but we're really worried about not treating people fairly or not giving everybody the same opportunities. And I think there is some fear, for example, if somebody of a certain ethnic minority, or if somebody of a different neurodiversity, or a man or a woman went for a certain job and they didn't get it, and part of that process was the 360 feedback, then I think there's an aspect of fear that there may be some repercussions of, I didn't get the job because nobody likes women, or I'm Jewish, or I am whatever it may be. I think that's why we don't like it, but I don't know. All I do see is the damage that is done by people going through the process that nobody wants to follow, that nobody wants to listen to, and and the whole thing can fall down sometimes. It's a bit worrying, but it reassures me that, you know, common sense still exists out there somewhere.
Well, yeah. I mean, no one's system is perfect, and everyone's system has flaws. But it was important to me that the team felt that I had the qualities and the ability to lead. Because if they weren't behind me, there's no point in me doing it.
No, there's no point. At which point, and I know we've already pointed out several times, you didn't just want to be the token girl who's in charge.
No.
You know, you didn't just want to be whilst I'm sure it make for a lovely poster, and there probably are out there, you didn't want to be the poster girl just for, oh, here's the person we've got to tick the box. You know, this person's a great leader, first and foremost. You know, and the fact you're a woman needs to be the fourth or fifth thing that gets mentioned. Right.
I mean, it's interesting, and, you know, it was, you know, I'm proud of my department, you know, you know what I mean? But I sincerely hope, and I have a lot of personal bias about this, which I often try to like keep in check, but I certainly hope that being a woman is not the most interesting thing about me.
Oh God, how sad would that be? Because it's something you've done nothing to develop. You've not worked on that.
Correct. It has nothing to do with me.
No.
Right. It was, you know, like, it has nothing to do with who I am as a person. It has nothing to do with what kind of firefighter I am. It has nothing to do with how I take care of my EMS patients. It has nothing to do with my leadership. It's a one tiny part of me. It's not like what defines me as a person. And I I struggle with what you're talking about, we have here in the US too. And the term for it is diversity hire. I have a huge bias with it in terms of being female, because I can't speak to other people's experiences with their cultures or whatever like that. I would never presume to speak to other people's experiences. I don't know. But I know what it's like to be a woman in a male-dominated field, so I can speak to that. And I do have a big personal bias about it.
And I think you were right to do that. Now, we've spoken about areas that you've personally tried to develop and ensure that you're, you know, showing up as the best version of yourself in that leadership role. But when you finally passed the process and you were given that position, was there anything that surprised you? Was there anything that stood out as something you didn't expect to deal with as a leader?
You know, I think one of the interesting things was that I was really focused on the big things in getting ready. Like, I was like, okay, if we have a vehicle fire and we roll up, what is my assignment going to be to my crew? What am I going to do for engine positioning? What am I going to do? Like, I was worried about like the bigger stuff. Yeah. I was not worried about the guys coming to me when I walked into the station and saying, hey, we're out of batteries for this. Yeah. Hey, we're out of that. Like there's so many like little tiny things like that I was not prepared for at all. And I remember the distinct feeling of looking at one of the guys like, why are you telling me this? Yeah. And then I was like, oh, right, because I'm supposed to be responsible for it, you know? Yeah, so it really, like, it's not the big things, you know, and that's what I was focused on. I was like, okay, if I get in the front seat, what do I have to do? Like, you know, I was like trying to make 8,000 scenarios in my head. Yeah. And then I'm like, well, you know, we're out of laundry detergent and we have to, everybody's gear needs to be cleaned. So,
or things like, you know, you're trying to get leave, you're trying to get holiday or leave for somebody on the watch, and you have to ring around other stations and try to, you know, coerce and convince other people to be able to support the station to get those sort of things done. Because I totally agree with you. It's in a leadership role, it really is the small things that make the big difference. Because I used to think exactly the same. I was worried about what would happen when I was the first, you know, appliance and attendance at a 10-pump job, and I was going to be in charge of that. But then I remembered, and I know you know this as well, you know, the fire service is here long before us, and it'll be long after. And you know what? The putting the wet stuff on the hot stuff, we're actually really good at that. You know, a lot of the time, you don't have to tell competent firefighters what to do. They pretty much know what to do. They were doing it quite well before you were in charge, and they were doing it quite well after. It's all of those small things where they don't know about policy, or they want to sort out Christmas on the watch, or they want to put together get together a barbecue for everybody, but they don't feel confident enough to do it, or somebody's trying to work on delivering training and they just want you to sit and listen to them for a minute present. They're all the tiny little things, they are the bricks that make up that solid wall, that solid foundation of great leadership. And I love that you became aware of that.
Yeah. That was my biggest thing that I just never thought about. Or, somebody broke something and they come to me and they're like, oh, this is broken. Then you got to play detective and go back 80 steps to find out what really, it's just like all those little things. And that stuff never crossed my mind.
I think it was one of our previous guests. It may have even been, I think it was Dan Mellier. I think he said the story of, and I'm going to get this totally wrong, the story of 2 steel balls and 2 firefighters in a room. Have you heard this one?
No,
it was such a basic example, but I love it. It says if you put 2 firefighters and 2 steel balls in a room and leave them for an hour, you come back, one of the balls is gone, the other one's broken in half, and neither of them saw anything at all.
That's 100% correct.
It's so true, because whenever we get a new piece of equipment on the watch, or everybody gets new uniform or something like that, you go into the locker room the next day and something's ripped or something's broken. And I'm not saying the firefighters don't take responsibility for something, but we like to play with stuff. We're naturally creative people, and if you want something testing, it will get tested by firefighters because they will play with it until it breaks.
Yeah, basically, we're basically chimps in a cave. You give us a new toy, but we're going to play with it till it breaks.
And within that lies the secret behind our power, though, because we're incredible problem solvers. Just because we're so passionate and so resourceful, but there's always the balance side of that, of when you put those people in a confined space, and the days when you don't have a lot of calls or something like that, people get mischievous. They start playing pranks on each other, and they start playing about with stuff, and that's when you're like, oh, okay, children, let's go outside and burn off some energy, because everyone's getting a little bit excitable.
That's right. Time to go throw a ladder.
Yeah, that's it. Let's go and throw some stuff up outside. So when you were planning on promotion, have you had the thought to continue on past where you are now? Because you're still, like you say, so young in the service, and you've reached level of lieutenant already. Is this not a stepping stone, but is this part of a future thing? Now you've got a taste for it and you've seen what your dad did in the past?
Yeah. So my dad, I've surpassed my dad already. So I was second lieutenant, first lieutenant. And then for our department, the next step would be captain, and then assistant chief. So I would like to continue to progress. And I hope that I will continue to learn and develop my skills so that I can progress to the next level.
Why do you want to progress?
I think it's important. I think for a couple of reasons. It's important for me as a person to see things through.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to just go part way and then step down. I also think that it's just important for growth and development to continue to build your skills and go on to the next level. Keeps you motivated, keeps you interested. I think it's good for the younger firemen, our newer firemen coming in to see that the hard work pays off, and to see that, that it can be done, and that if you're working focused on it and can see it through, there's good reward in it. For me also, I just know that I wouldn't really be satisfied with myself if I didn't, continue the work that I'm doing. But on the other side of it, if there came a time where there was changes in the department for whatever reason, or someone else came in with more experience than me or would be a better fit for the role, then I also have absolutely no problem with being a backseat rider and just, continuing to develop my skills in that role either. It's not going to make or break me as a fireman either.
No. I love what you say about demonstrating the aspect that hard work pays off, and that also, sometimes things will happen outside of your control. Somebody else will come in, more experience or a different approach to the job, and they may appear to get benefit over you. I operate as a crew commander in the UK, and I have been for probably 10 processes in the last year and a half, and I haven't got any of them. To progress beyond where I am now. And I do a lot of projects. I do a lot of other work in the fire department. And I regularly get asked by the pessimists, oh, Pete, what's the point? The system's against you. Your face doesn't fit or something like that. And they expect you to eventually give up. But I love the idea, and I may be slightly romantic about it, that this all forms part of my story. You know, when I look back on this, when I am wherever I go in the fire department, whether I stay in the current service or even move country or whatever it may be, I'll be able to say to people, hey, look, you know, I had setbacks as well. Everybody's had those setbacks. There was a time when I went through 10 processes and didn't get any of them, you know, and that was, to me, is the universe, you know, asking me, how much do you really want it? Do you want it just because it's easy? Do you want it just because you're going from success to success and it looks like you're hitting triples every second and you can't do anything wrong? But I think it's more significant for people to handle those setbacks. Have you ever had any setbacks in the job? And if so, how did you deal with them?
I mean, I think you always have like good days or bad days, and you always have things that you wish could go better for you. There's always you said earlier, and it's very true, firefighters have big personalities, and when you have big personalities, you can have big communication problems.
Yes.
And so, especially early on, before I was in an officer's seat, even, any conflicts or anything, resolutions like that, it does make you really take pause and feel like, this is difficult and challenging, and this is not why I'm doing this. Like, you almost just want to like shut down and not want to deal with any kind of like, for lack of a better term, drama. Yeah. You're like, I'm just here to be a firefighter. I don't care, that kind of thing. Yeah. But really the reality of the situation is that when you have a setback with communication, or you're not getting along with somebody in the department, there's so much benefit to just making the effort, as uncomfortable as it may be, to reaching common ground. Because even if you're never going to be that person's best friend and go have a beer with them, you can still reach the point where you can find some mutuality. Yeah. If the only thing that you have in common is that you are both firefighters and you both want to serve, then just focus on that.
That's your common ground. Absolutely. It's about flexing your style, isn't it? And having a different way to say it. Everybody can get on with people that are the same as themselves. That's not leadership.
Right.
Being leadership, when you come to an incident, you've got to be able to connect with people of all different backgrounds, of all different communities. And again, you can't control the firefighters that are going to get assigned to your station, assigned to your watch. And you really need to be able to be interested in them enough to be able to adapt your style, to be able to seek that common ground, as you rightly point out there.
Right. And it's very challenging when everybody has their own view of the world, and you get really caught up in that. And then sometimes you think that makes you right, or makes your point of view right and correct. But sometimes there's not a right or wrong. Sometimes it's just a different view. And it's really hard pill to swallow when you're trying to grow as a professional, to have enough self-reflection rather to say, okay, well, maybe I do have something that I can do differently or change, and that, I think that's a huge, huge piece of being a good leader is, I've been asked before in interviews, what's the most important aspect of leadership? And I always say self-reflection, because if you can't admit that you don't know, if you can't admit that you didn't do something correctly, if you can't admit that you did not communicate that way, the best way that you could, then you really can't be a leader. Because if you are a leader and you think it's because you've reached the pinnacle and you know everything, that's not going to be you.
But equally, even if you do think you know everything, can you communicate that to somebody? And you see this with coaches and stuff in sporting environments. You may know exactly the right way to do it. Maybe not. But let's assume that you do. If you can't communicate that to anybody, it's completely useless. And I love what you said about being right and wrong as well. If you're seeking to understand somebody and seeking to be understood, then you're going to get a lot further than seeking to be right or wrong. Because if somebody's been brought up, even just the simplest things like right and wrong isn't... It's not always agreed on, like if they've been brought up that the grass is blue, and for some reason their parents have always told them that the grass is blue, if you walk up to them and say the grass is green, they are going to disagree with you. Not because they hate you, because they believe the grass is blue. It's always been blue. Right. I've always been told it's blue, and that it's not right or wrong to them. It's just how they see the world. They don't need to be proven right. You have to ask yourself, does their belief cause damage to themselves or somebody else? If it's not causing damage, then that's absolutely fine. They have a different belief to you, and that's good. It enriches the team. It can even be something that you admire about them, that they can see the world in such a different way. Right.
And then if you have somebody that has a different view like that, and then you get on an EMS call with somebody who you feel is being belligerent and they're a bluegrass person, then you have another bluegrass person on the team that can talk to them. So
Absolutely.
the bluegrass people are valuable to you, you know? So everybody has their own place, but it's what is your goal? Is your goal to be right, or is your goal to be a leader?
Love it. Absolutely love it. And you know what? I want to echo it back. And I know, again, we're not focusing around this, but when we look at the boy-girl analogy in the fire department, certainly in the UK, we go to certain communities where there still lies some very entrenched beliefs about who women can speak to, who women can't speak to, whether or not they are allowed to be seen or not seen, or whether they're allowed to leave the house or they're not allowed to leave the house. And if you don't have a female on your crew, then you can't speak to the woman. They will not allow you to speak to the woman. Whereas if you do have a woman on your crew, then that's a benefit. And also you'll go to some communities, or even if you go to a household where a woman has been the victim of domestic violence, they may see all men as angry threats. So they may not wish to communicate with you. So it's about knowing, hey, I've got a bluegrass person on my team. Let's try and change, let's try and adapt our style, and saying, look, you know, Cara, over you come, or whoever, you know, somebody like that, come over, and you know, I'd love you to just go in there and speak to this person and try and get an understanding for how this started, if you could, please. And they may have to go in and take their shoes off. They make this a different approach, and that is what it is, that diversity in the team that makes us that strong with this beautiful cocktail of different characters.
It's really, you know, when you talk about diversity in the fire service, I think the focus should be everybody can do the same exact job. If you can do the job, if you can all do the same exact job and you can all execute it and do it well without, you know, taking any, you know, exceptions or things like that, that should be the basis. And then from there, you want to include a variety of different worldviews, different approaches, different experiences, so that you make your team richer. But I don't think, and this is again just personal bias, I don't think you should reverse it and start the other way.
Never, ever. No. You want the elite, and the elite can be from all backgrounds, you know, but we do want the top 5%, and then let's work forward from who is left at the top 5%. Let's not switch it round, and you know, let's take the top 80% and filter off the type of people that we think we like. Well, we're going into a dangerous ground then, because you might end up with all of the ones you think you want are only in the 30 percentile. They're nowhere near the top. Now, a big aspect that we're talking about there, you talk about meeting a baseline, and this echoes a lot to me about the physicality of the job. Now, obviously, as we sort of alluded to earlier, you have a tremendous passion for fitness and health and wellness in some Florian Fitness that you run. How have you found the physicality of the job joining? Was it something you had to prepare for, or did you have an understanding of what, I know obviously your dad did it, so you knew what would be expected of you, but how important is maintaining that in the role? You know,
it's interesting because in my dad's time, fitness was not even an aspect. I don't think he ever had to do a physical fitness test. I don't think he ever had to do a breathe down. I don't think he ever had to do any of that. In fact, I know he didn't. So it's interesting. He didn't have to do crap, you know? So for me, I was always I was fairly fit, and, you know, I exercised regularly and, you know, that kind of thing when I first started. And then I realized that I was not in any kind of shape to be a firefighter.
Really?
Very quickly, you know, on my first call, I was like, oh. So it became very apparent to me that firefighters have to have a different kind of fitness. And one of the things that I started to try to find out more about that, because I realized really quickly that the workouts and things that I was doing were not really helping me reach my firefighting goals.
Yeah.
So I actually read the book Firefighter Functional Fitness by Dan Kerrigan and Jim Moss, and it absolutely changed everything that I was doing for fitness. I really recommend it to anybody that has not read it. It's very focused on doing fitness and exercises that are functional and in the way that firefighters function. So we have to look at the things that we have to do on the job and are asking our bodies to do. And for me, it's a couple different things. I'm a certified trainer myself, so I teach fitness classes, and I started to teach firefighter functional fitness as well, and that's how St. Florian Fitness got started. We are seeing in the United States yearly 40% or higher line of duty deaths are related to poor cardiac health or medical events.
Really?
Yes. So clearly that's telling us that our firefighters are not as fit as they should be and need to be in order to be able to do the job and go home to their families. So I was not okay with those numbers. And I started St. Florian Fitness to educate and try to reduce line of duty death through my work as a fitness trainer and wellness educator. And that's why I do it. So I post workouts on my Instagram and Facebook account, and they are focused on firefighter functional fitness training. So pulls, pushes, lifts, drags, carries.
I saw your pulls and your drags the other day where you were moving forward on all fours, dragging the bag, and then walking backwards, dropping down onto your bum and doing effectively, like you say, dummy drags, but staying low, ideally like below the neutral plane in a compartment, being able to maneuver with a casualty, because it brings in, I mean, obviously you've alluded to functional fitness, it brings in so many different planes of movement and having to, pull a weight while you're almost lying prone, engaging so many different parts of the shoulder. And I love that. And even I saw one where you were masked up in like a breathing apparatus mask on the rower doing sort of high intervals, which I just thought was great.
Yeah, I work out with blast mask, and that's a regulator piece that you can put on your face mask, and it has a valve on it so that you can adjust how much intake you get. Yeah. And it's the best thing that I've found to simulate being on a regulator, being on a SCBA mask.
I've got exactly the same.
I do work out.
Mine's called an oxygen deprivation mask, I think it is. And you can change the size of the valve, and there's a little click over device beneath it to the point where if you put it on, I think mine's level 8, it is really difficult to draw breath. I mean, it sucks to your face quite dramatically.
Yeah. So I think it's so important. And I do have workouts posted where I'm in my gear with an air pack on and doing things like that. And I think it's so important to work out in that way because there's a couple of my posts that talk about the flexibility, and I actually show myself in regular workout clothes and just with my bunker pants on, then in full gear, doing different types of stretches and lunges. Yeah. And you can see how your movement is restricted.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you are working out regularly, but then you put your gear on and you work out, you really see what the difference is. And like our air bottles are 45-minute bottles, but you really have to be able to work out in it to see how long you're going to have on your bottle before you have to leave your structure. When your low air alarm starts going off and your heads up display is yellow, you need to start thinking about heading for your exit. And where are you going to be at that time? And what are you going to be doing? Have you just found your victim? Have you just reached the seat of the fire? Yeah. And then you have to turn around and get out? That's not conducive to the job.
Plus, you don't tend to move backwards as quickly as you move forwards. There's a whole different muscle group involved there. Plus, likelihood if you found your victim, you're going to be carrying a load at that point.
Correct. So the other issue for me is I'm small. I'm only 5'1", and I'm a female. So
you are
our
small.
body composition.
Crikey, 5'1". I love that.
I'm small. So all the guys, we have this running joke. They'll say short or shorty, and I tell them I'm not short. I'm fun size.
You're fun size. Hey, dynamite comes in small packages,
That's right. So for me, I had to really learn how to work out my body in a way that I could make sure that I could get that heaviest guy on my team out. Yeah. I never want to say I can't get him out because I'm too small. That's not
heavy
acceptable.
is he?
I can't be a fireman. I have a guy that's probably like 300 pounds, 250, 300, big, tall guy.
Yeah. I was going to say, he's probably a light guy. Him. We've got some big ones over here. I can
drag him.
Really? Yeah. I haven't got a single member of my team that could get me out. I'm 6'5", and I'm 19 and a half stone. So what's that in pounds? I don't know. I bet it's up around the high 200s. I don't do the pound conversion. Yeah. I'm 219 kilos, 260, something like that.
Yeah. So for me, I had to make sure that I could focus my fitness on building my upper body strength. So I work on that a lot because I'm small and I need to overcome it. And I need to work on my reach and using mechanical advantage. So if there's something that I can't do with my bare hands, I need to figure out how to do it with webbing. Yeah. If there's something that I can't, if there's a tool that I need to use in a different way because of my height or my build, then I figure out how to do it. Because I'm never going to go into something and say, I can't do it because I'm too small. That's not an option. I can't be a firefighter then. And I don't like it. Like we talked about this bias that I have, but I absolutely 100% disagree with any of the physical exams which they give a female a option to do less of something or carry a lighter weight.
Yeah.
I 100% disagree with that.
I hate that.
I don't think it's acceptable. I don't agree. I don't think that they should. It's the end results job. You can either do the job or you can't do the job. There's nobody on the fire ground that's going to say to you, you're not going to come back out of the building and say, hey, I've got a 250-pound guy trapped on the second floor. I'm tapping out. Can somebody else go get him?
Exactly.
No, he's gone already because you wasted 5 minutes coming out there telling me you couldn't do the job. The expectation has to be there. The other thing that is so vital for firefighters is you really have to think about not just like the functional fitness part, like doing pulls, carries, pushes, drags, like making sure that you're exercising your body in that way to prepare for the work that you're actually required to do. But you also have to think about the shock load on your cardiovascular system. So you're sitting in the firehouse, or you're maybe doing a little bit of training, or you're hanging out or having a meal or whatever. And then the bell hits, your adrenaline immediately starts jumping. You're moving at a very quick pace. You're asking your joints and muscles to operate very quickly and rapidly, climbing in and out of apparatus. And then you're on the fire ground. Let's say you're working for 30 to 45 minutes on a bottle at an extremely high heart rate, high heat.
So this is some real specific stuff. And do you do these as online courses, or is it all through your Instagram profile? Or
I try to post workouts, regularly on my Instagram and Facebook page. I also offer a seminar where I go out and teach. I talk about fitness, about overall wellness, and I talk about mental health in the fire service. And I actually teach an optional workout at the end of just like how to get started with functional fitness, high intensity interval training.
Love that.
So I have a couple different, options and ways to do it. Certainly with COVID, I have not been doing as much on-site training as I had prior.
Yeah.
But it's starting to come back. It's starting to come back now, which is great to see. But I do try to post things on Facebook and Instagram, workouts that people can try, or just to show the example of things that you can do, because it is so important to me. And some people don't have access to trainers or gyms or things like that right now. But you can work out in your station, like use what you got,
Yeah, I always say to people, it's not your resources, it's your resourcefulness, because everything you need is on the truck. You might think you need the big sexy gym, but you know what? It's all there.
Right. I say grab a pack of hose and go up and down the stairs, or, put your air pack and your gear on and do some step ups off the tailboard.
Absolutely.
Do some squats, do some overhead. I think obviously not as much for you, but for me, all of our work is there's a lot of overhead work,
Oh yeah.
So
there's a lot of stuff you need to be familiar with.
You gotta do a lot of overhead work. So reaches, and, if you grab a pike pole and you're doing 10 reps on each side of, reaching up with your air pack on, you're going to feel it in your shoulders, and you're going to realize, oh, this is what I need to be working on,
Now we've gotten to that point where I want to finish with some quick fire round. So number one, have you ever been afraid in the job?
Yes, absolutely. I think fear is a very useful tool. I think that if you are no longer afraid, you have become complacent, and that's far more dangerous.
Absolutely. Fear is one of those things that I think we're all still get scared. Bravery is not the absence of fear, but it's kind of that realization that there's something more important at stake. So you're going to do it anyway, but it doesn't mean that you're not scared. So I think that's something that people think doesn't exist anymore. You've been in a year, 2 years, 10 years. You should still get that trigger, because it's great. It triggers the adrenaline and switches you on.
Right. It should make you more alert to your surroundings and your situational awareness.
So you've mentioned lots of different resources like Functional Firefighter Fitness and some of the study guides that you referenced. What have been a reference or a book or a resource that you've used for your personal development that you would recommend to other people?
Most recently, I read Firefighter Success, and that's an excellent book. That's by Jim Moss. And it's really broken down into very readable and useful sections that kind of just touch on so many points of firefighting and so many aspects of leadership and professionalism. And I just found it really enthralling. And I find myself going back and looking at different parts of the book regularly.
Love that. Now, personal things now. What habit have you developed in the last sort of 1 to 3 years that you feel has really helped you and benefited you?
I think definitely the consistency of working out every day and focusing my workouts on the kind of work that I need to do as a fireman. That has been the biggest thing for me. It's just really, it started out as motivation, but you're not always going to have motivation. So you need to develop discipline.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the ways to develop discipline was to make it a habit. It's just something that I automatically do now.
Somebody just got home. I saw the dog. I heard the dog shouting away.
No, there's no one here. He's constantly on a high security alert, and I have no idea why.
Good boy. Good boy. That's what he's there for.
He thinks
That's what you want him.
He thinks it's his job to protect me from horrible people like the mailman.
It is. Come on. Yeah, there's some weird mail dudes out there. Don't worry about it.
Well, he apparently thinks the mailman's going to murder me every single day.
Well, at least that's not going to be the case as long as he's around.
No.
Now, we've spoken, I think the whole point of the podcast, was just to share something with so many people. We've got 60-something countries listening in on us now. So if you did have that big, proverbial, gigantic billboard in the sky, and you could put one message on it, whether that be for firefighters or just for the community and for people as a whole at the minute, at this strange, crazy period of time, what would you put on that billboard, and what would be the message you want to share with people?
This was like a little bit challenging for me, but I think that I will stick with what I know. If I had the opportunity to make a billboard, I would say fitness in the fire service is not optional. There may be a moment that comes when you have to switch from trying to defeat the fire to trying to just survive the fire. And we should all be training daily for that moment.
I love it. I totally agree with you as well. I'm after it every single day. I think it's such a priority that we can never lose sight of. No matter how much our role diversifies, we cannot forget that, we've got to get ourselves out of there. And if we're not the fittest, best version of ourselves, then we can't ultimately serve the communities.
Right.
And finally, what's next for you? What's next in your big, hairy, audacious goals, and what are you working on currently?
Well, I recently got certified to work with juveniles who commit arson or are at risk for committing arson. So that's the new scope of the field that I have not done yet. So I'm excited to get started with that.
I think you're going to be amazing at that. Given your background, you're going to just slot into that perfectly.
I'm really excited for the opportunity, and it was a really excellent class to take, and I took it down at our fire academy here. And so I'm excited to get started with that. And, now that I'm a first lieutenant, I have more things to learn and more duties to take on to start to prepare me for the path to being a captain. So I'm just focused on trying to make sure that I can continue to grow as a fire officer and continue to gain knowledge and skills so that I can, serve and hopefully bring up the next great generation of leaders.
I love it. The journey never ends. That's it. There's no destination. I always say to people, it's about the journey. You've got to love it. You've got to be that eternal student.
That's right.
So I will stick it all in the notes below, but I'll be watching in some Florian Fitness, watching you getting after it, kicking ass, taking names every single day. I really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to be here with us on the podcast, Cara. It really means a lot to me. Please send love to all the guys and girls on the crews out there and look after yourself.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my message, and I enjoyed talking to you so much. I hope that, all the firemen out there really make fitness and health a priority, because, we have to do it for the job, but we have to do it for ourselves too.
I will say as well that Cara has demonstrated incredible patience with me today. The wizards of internet and Wi-Fi were trying to get together to end our conversation at several points. So, control the controllables, no frustration was expressed, and Cara was the consummate professional. So thank you so much, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yes, thank you so much. Take care. Stay safe.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there we have it, boys and girls. That is a wrap. Told you I'd see you on the other side. That was my conversation with Cara. Another first for the podcast. There's so many incredible men and women out there breaking barriers. Real trailblazers. Such a privilege to have these people on the podcast. And people like Cara not being intimidated by the things that have gone before, the fact that she is the first, hopefully the first of many. Pushing the boundaries, developing herself in that way. I love the bit Cara spoke about being voted, having to be nominated, having to be supported by your crews when going for that next level, when going for that promotion. We should all want to follow the people that are entrusted to lead us. It's such a privilege, such a responsibility. I think Cara showed some amazing self-awareness today. Really looks like she's thought about the soft skills, the small things that make the big difference in the job. Hope you took some inspiration from Cara today. If you want some more information, if you want some tips, some tricks, some free advice on how to stay fitter and healthier and more functional in your job in the emergency services as a frontline firefighter, then head over to St. Florian Fitness. St. Florian, of course, the patron saint of firefighters, which I'm sure you knew anyway. Hope you enjoyed it today. Hope you took some real value. A quick reminder from the podcast, your chance to win a pair of Hikes Black Eagle Safety. You've literally got 1 week. Last chance to get yourself in there. Head over to the podcast, find the post, tag it, follow it, share it, get yourself in the draw. June 30th, just 5 days away, we'll be drawing the winner. Of course, supported from the big thanks from our podcast partner, Hikes. Really appreciate you being here with us. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we've got episodes coming out every single week. If you took some benefit from today's episode, don't be selfish. Share it with somebody. Post the link, grab one of the sound bites, share it to your page, share it in your story. Pass on some of Cara's messages from today. Give that a gift to somebody that needs it. And until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry. And we look forward to having you back here again real soon on the Firefighters Podcast.